Hi everybody, welcome to Saturday Live at the Backyard Bird Center. As we promised last week to you guys, we were going to talk about quality bird seed this week. And you know, we know that, and we say this all the time, that feeding birds is good for you and it's good for the birds. Many studies have shown that feeding birds is relaxing, it lowers your blood pressure, it helps you and in your health. Doctors recommend bird feeding for patients who are facing heart surgery and things such as this as a method of relaxation and to help their state. We know now from a lot of scientific studies that we're helping the birds by feeding birds, as long as we do it in a good, healthy manner and make good choices on the foods, keep our feeders clean and keep our bird baths clean. That they survive harsh stretches of winter in areas where people are feeding birds and have unfrozen water for them as a source in the winter months. So we know that they're benefiting from bird feeders. So feeding birds is good for you and it's good for the birds. Now, we get a lot of questions about the seed choices. You know, we've talked about feeders, we've talked about bird baths, talked about a lot of different things. But the seed itself is important. And there's no greater probably topic that we get the most confusion about from people who come in who have been feeding birds for years, or they may have been feeding by buying just bird seed anywhere at grocery stores and places like that. And they come in and they go, I need a bag of that bird seed. And they say, well, we've got lots of bags of bird seed. Well, what do you want? You know, just that general bird seed. Well, unfortunately, we've been selling bird seed at really cheap prices in places for a long time that have people thinking that that's good quality stuff and that birds actually like it. But, you know, when we approach things scientifically and even common sense wise, we do studies and we show what do the birds want, and we do the study set up, and we did this at our nature center in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania several years ago, and we rotated the seeds and locations and had students document what birds were eating what seeds. And these kind of seed tests have been done for years and years and years by many different publications and many different universities and things. And it always comes out that black oil sunflower is the #1 seed preferred by the greatest diversity of birds. And then things like safflower and peanuts, and then even white millet will actually come out fairly highly on the seed preferences. And way down on those lists, and not even registering hardly at all in most of those tests, are things like milo and cracked corn and wheat and oats and a lot of those grains, because there are two different sets of birds out there, two different bird preferences basically, and that are the grain eaters and the seed eaters. Grain eaters, grains of course, are cracked corn, millet, milo, oats, buckwheat, things like that. Seeds are sunflower, safflower, peanuts, Niger, things like that the birds actually either crack it open or find it in the hulless form, and they eat those. Now, what birds like what? Well, the grain eaters are the blackbirds, the house sparrows, some of our native sparrows like juncos, like millet, and dove, quail, things like that are the grain eaters. The seed eaters are the cardinals, the chickadees, the titmice, the goldfinches, the woodpeckers, the birds that you pretty much want at your bird feeders. So when we go to make our choices on what bird seed to buy, to grab a generic bag of just anything off of the shelf and go, oh, that's the cheapest bag, let's buy that, and taking it home and throwing it out, and then being disappointed that all you've got are sparrows and blackbirds in your backyard and you don't have any of the pretty birds, then you have to look at what you're feeding. So what we've done today is we brought in a couple of sample bags here. I went by this morning and bought a cheap bag of birdseed off of a shelf and opened that up and put that here. And then I've got a couple of my bags of birdseed. So we're going to try to lower the camera down so we can see them when I talk here, and I'll be pointing at them. But the plate on the far right here is the bag of birdseed I bought this morning. And it is, it's funny, when we list ingredients, you're supposed to list the individual ingredients of the seeds that are inside. On the side of this bag of birdseed, it said grain products, and then sunflower, and that was it. Well, there are a few sunflower seeds in here. You can see although they're not good and black like these over here from my store, because these, the ones over here, are very pale because they're covered in dust from the cracked corn that isn't very clean, and the grains in here that aren't very clean. But this is mainly milo, cracked corn, with a few sunflowers thrown in there to make you think you're getting something that's worth buying. So you're going to spend money on this bag of birdseed, and it may be cheap, but it's even, you're not getting but a few pennies worth of sunflower seed in there, which is the most preferred birdseed there is. Now, you might find this interesting. This plate of seed was brought in a bag from a customer who had bought this kind of seed, put it in his feeder, and this is what was left in the bottom of the seed that nobody would eat. This is almost all milo, which is grain sorghum, and also there's even a lot of corn in there, and there's even a few sunflowers. They were probably buried at the bottom, and the birds couldn't get to it. So when you're talking about the amount that the birds aren't eating out of this bag of birdseed, and you're having to throw it in the woods for the raccoons and the possums, you're not getting much for your money, even though it might be a cheap bag of birdseed. Over here on this side are my two main mixes, excluding my finch mixes. That's a completely different show. But this is my theory of bird feeding. In your main feeder, to attract the pretty birds like cardinals and chickadees and titmice, I like sunflower, safflower, and peanuts. And I have two different kinds of sunflower in this mix called Boardwalk Blend. And I also use Nutri-Saf instead of regular safflower because it's higher in oil and actually it has a softer coat and the birds can eat it a little bit better. So this is seed for the seed eaters that you want to attract. I don't put any millet, which I find out of all this junk seed over here, the only seed in there that I would want to feed really on a regular basis, that little bit of sunflower and the millet. Well, I create my own mix called ground throw. This is my grain mix for my juncos, my white-throated sparrows, white-crowned sparrows, those birds that are favorable, but they want to feed off the ground. So what I do is put this up in my main feeders, and then at the end of my feeding, when I've filled all my feeders, my finch feeders, my peanut feeders, and my multi-seed feeders, I take a scoop of this ground throw and I toss it out on the ground in the bare dirt area for those juncos and for those white-throated sparrows. So they have their food too. So all of this is eaten. Very little of this is eaten. So what are you getting for your money when you buy food that nobody wants, birds don't want? Now, if you live in the desert Southwest, yes, milo is eaten out there and cracked corn's eaten out there because they have so many different dove species and so many different quail. But around here we just don't. So you'll get what you pay for. So if you like the videos, please like them, share them, send in ideas for future shows. And until then, come by, let's talk birds.